Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Matthew Willington. I'm the Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care. In the interest of safety, if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble in front of the King Henry building at the end of Henry I Street. That's not the normal evacuation place because of the ice rink, so please do take note of that. In order to comply with the Portsmouth Cultural Trust Fire Marshal's regulations, please to remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. I'll draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed from a camera in a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and recording will be on the Council's website. The camera will mainly capture the back of those making deputations, but there will be some footage of those making deputations as they approach and leave the table where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room while the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Finally, I ask everyone to use the microphones provided when they are speaking, and to use the microphones you just press the button on the right hand side to activate and deactivate. So I'll just take to begin with, there's no apologies for absence. I can see both Councillors Stubbs and Fielding are here. Are there any declarations of members' interest?
No.
Thank you. Item 3, forward plan and mission. As stated on the agenda, it's just an acknowledgement that the strategy wasn't put on the original forward plan and mission covering 9th of October to the 1st of January 2019, and that the Scrutiny Management Panel's chair has been notified and a public notice was published, so that I'm just going to accept the recommendations that 1, the emissions to the forward plan for November 2018 be noted, and 2, that publication of the emission notice be noted. We now come on to item 4, which is the adult social care, older persons care home strategy, and I understand, and we've had 6 written deputations, so thank you for everyone who did those deputations, and I have Christine Frampton and Sue Harvey, who I presume are the 2 ladies here, brilliant, who are going to read out their written deputations. So if I could ask Christine Frampton to go first, please. Thank you.
Thanks. Right, good evening. My name is Christine Frampton and my mother is a resident of Hilsey Lodge. My deputation is against the selection of option 4, which includes the closure of Hilsey Lodge. Point 1. On the 5th of November, we received a letter from Portsmouth City Council informing of a proposed closure of Hilsey Lodge and inviting us to a meeting on the 15th of November. The letter also stated that we had until midday on the 19th of November to lodge any objections. Until after the meeting with the representatives, we would not be in a position to fully digest the information and to understand and respond accordingly. At the meeting on the 15th of November, relatives were handed a 17-page copy of the notice of meeting. It contains a great deal of information to be digested and potentially challenged. We do not consider that the time allowed for comments to be reasonable. However, we are attempting this. Point 2. Assisted living with 24/7 on-site care is not the whole picture. Dementia is a progressive disease, and there comes a time when assisted living is not sufficient. If the expected number of people with dementia is expected to increase, surely the requirement for residential care also rises. The report says that people prefer to stay in their own homes or within assisted living accommodation, and there is a decline in demand for residential care. At the meeting with relatives of the residents, this statement was the hardest to understand. There were a lot of angry people who each had a story to tell about the difficulties they had encountered trying to get access to residential care in Portsmouth, whether the provider was PCC or the commercial sector. How can you say that there is a decline in requirement for residential care? We refute this. Point 3. Hilsey Lodge not being fit for purpose. In the notice of meeting it states that 2.5 million would be required to refurbish Hilsey Lodge. There was talk of 2 small bedrooms, 2 narrow corridors and lack of ensuite bathrooms. None of these requirements are included in the latest CQC reports. Is the lack of ensuite bathroom a standard which PCC based suitability on? This lack of amenities does not appear to concern the relatives or the residents. They're more concerned with the level of care. Hilsey Lodge is a professional, well-run home. We know they require a new boiler. A figure of 300,000 for boiler replacement was quoted. This is considerable less than £2.5 million. It was stated that residents would be made to move out. Is this true? During the recent refurbishment at Hilsey Lodge, while it was chaotic at times, with careful planning by the staff, the residents were not affected. So should this be revisited as a viable option? Point 4. In this day and age, we are all aware that there is not a bottomless pit of money, and there are a number of demands on Portsmouth City Council resources. It's vital, therefore, that money is spent wisely and with careful consideration. The preferred option 4 proposal is based on the assumption that the demand for residential care will drop, which logically is questionable. If the facilities are not there, then they cannot be used and demand will drop. And my last point, 5 years ago, Portsmouth City Council failed to proceed in a proposal concerning the closure of Hilsey Lodge due to lack of funding. Are the council confident that they will have funding for redevelopment of Edinburgh House site and Hilsey Lodge site? What would happen to these 2 sites if adequate funding was not available? Would they be left empty, sold off, or will status quo prevail? The proposed redevelopments will require a huge amount of investment. All we're asking is that before the proposal is agreed, that Portsmouth City Council are sure that they are acting on correct assumptions and it's the best option that ensures money is spent wisely and to meet future needs. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I call on Sue Harvey then to read your written deputation? Thank you.
Yes, good evening. My name's Susan Harvey and my father's a resident at Hilsey Lodge. I've seen many of the deputations you have in front of you and I hope you've had a chance to read and digest them. There were just a couple of other issues that I would like to have more time to gather information on. Under the Freedom of Information Act, a lot of the figures that I'm after aren't available for a period of maybe 20 days, and we haven't had that time. The first point is that in the article in the Portsmouth News on Friday the 9th of November, it states the 2 homes have provision for 65 residents between them, but haven't been at full capacity for a number of years, as more people are opting to stay at home to retain their independence. And I know that statement to be untrue, and it's grossly misleading. When I was searching for a place for my father in March of 2017, Hilsey Lodge could take him for a period of 2 weeks assessment, but they had to use the respite room, and there was no guarantee of permanent place, as they were full, as indeed were Shearwater and Edinburgh House at the time. So I would like to seek confirmation of the level of occupancy over the last few years from these homes. The second point is that the meeting at Hilsey Lodge on the 15th of November, the matter of room availability was raised and the issue of bed blockers at Queen Alexandra was mentioned. Marie Edwards stated categorically that there was no shortage of beds and that the whole issue of bed blockers was just media hype. All of the relatives at the meeting were shocked, as many of us had had personal experience of this, and we all have a tale to tell. So on Saturday the 17th of November, I visited the hospital. I visited wards F2, F3, I went to G level, and I went to E4, and I spoke to many staff. I queried the number of bed blockers on the ward, and I passed on Marie Edwards' comments on the matter. And while some of the staff were reluctant to give figures, their reactions spoke volumes. Other staff were more forthcoming, and I was told that at least 8 patients were awaiting discharge to residential dementia care, medically fit for discharge but no place to go, which is what bed blockers mean. So I will be seeking confirmation of that figure. I have put in a request under the Freedom of Information Act to the hospital, but speaking to a gentleman this morning, it will take a bit longer yet. So I feel that any decision on the future of Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge shouldn't be made until a true picture of the need for residential dementia care in Portsmouth is established. This hasn't been possible in the short amount of time available to us. All of the residents in this home have already exhausted all other options of care. We've all looked after our loved ones at home for as long as we can. There isn't any other choice, and the decision to put your loved one in a residential home is never taken lightly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. You're very welcome to stay where you are. And sir, would you like to come forward as well if you'd like to? That's fine, rather than sitting on your own at the back there. So if I could now call on Angela Dreyer to present the report.
Thank you very much. The purpose of the report is to set out the proposed strategic direction for the provision of good quality, sustainable accommodation for adult social care in Portsmouth. These proposals are based on our work to understand the current and future accommodation needs for social care and residents in the city. I'm not intending to read every paragraph of the report out, but we'll pick some key points, and obviously are happy to take questions at the end. The recommendations that we are seeking is that the Cabinet member approves the preferred option of option 4 in relation to the rationalisation of the in-house residential estate, agrees that officers commence immediate engagement with residents, families, staff and the wider stakeholders, e.g. primary care, on the closure of Edinburgh House in 2019 and Hilsey Lodge in 2020, and agrees that work continues on repurposing the existing Edinburgh House site for the development of a specific dementia extra care facility, acknowledging that any development will be subject to securing sufficient capital funding. In looking at having a specific dementia extra care facility, what we mean by that is one that is designed around the needs of people with dementia. It will be different from the existing extra care provisions that we have in the city. Obviously, safety of the residents will be paramount, and the design will be specific to meet best practice standards for extra care dementia. There will be specifically trained and staff on site 24/7, offering relevant support to residents as defined by their individual needs, but also available at other times to them. Portsmouth City Council Adult Services currently owns and runs 5 care homes. We have Edinburgh House, a 30-bedded unit for older people with dementia, Hilsey Lodge, which has 35 beds for older people with dementia, Shearwater, 60 beds for older people with dementia, Victory Unit, which is a 20-bedded rehabilitation and reablement unit, and we also own and run Russets, which can accommodate up to 18 people with a learning disability and provides a mixture of permanent and respite options. In addition to those 5 homes, we also own Harry Sotnick House, which is a 92-bedded nursing home for older people with dementia. The home is currently run by Hampshire County Council on our behalf until March 2020. 2 of the care homes, Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge, are old homes. Edinburgh House was built in 1960 and Hilsey Lodge was built in 1977, and are limited in the residents they are able to now support due to the physical layout of the units. Excuse me. In December 2015, PCC undertook a care home review feasibility study. This report reviewed the building conditions of Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge, and the report concluded that without significant investment of approximately 2.26 million in Edinburgh House and 2.62 million in Hilsey Lodge, the buildings would no longer be operational within approximately 3 years. Even if the money was spent, the physical environment of the homes would still not be fit for purpose and would not be able to meet the physical and social demands of the residents. As these are older properties, they would not meet today's minimum requirements for new residential homes, and although that doesn't apply to existing homes, the CQC report in Hilsey did raise the fact that the current layout didn't meet current best practice standards on the environment. Following the inspections by CQC in 2017, Shearwater and Hilsey Lodge were rated as inadequate and placed in special measures, and a key element of that was staffing levels, which were deemed to be inadequate. In Hilsey Lodge, as I've said, the physical environment was viewed as tired and dated and not conducive to modern care requirements at that time. The changing complexities of the people that we are seeing and being supported has also required a review of our current staffing levels, and a review was undertaken in the 3 homes, Edinburgh, Hilsey and Shearwater, which determined that based on the dependency of residents, a significant increase in staffing was required to ensure safe quality care in each unit. The tool we used and the best practice available determined that we needed a ratio of 1 to 4 staff to residents for needs during the day, which is an increase of 33% on the permanent staffing levels. I just want to say at this time that the staffing levels have been topped up through agency staff for the time being, and a ratio of 1 to 7 overnight. Staffing levels within the homes have been increased temporarily in the current financial year. The 3 homes for older people with dementia have a total of 125 beds available for use. Taking Harry Sotnick back into Portsmouth City Council management also gives us nomination rights for all of the 92 beds, rather than the 62 beds available under the previous contractual arrangement. This will give a total current potential in-house stock for older people with dementia of 214 residential and nursing beds. People with dementia requiring residential care will either have that need met in the independent sector or within our in-house provision. Since March 2016, the demand for residential placements for people with dementia has reduced, and we have seen a reduction in the number of people with dementia seeking residential care through supporting people longer at home. In March 2016, 114 beds were purchased in the independent sector and 98 in-house beds were occupied. In March 2017, the figures had reduced to 109 in the independent sector and 94 in-house. And in March 2018, the figure was 110 in the independent sector and 69 in-house. Following the CQC inspections, an embargo was placed on admissions to Edinburgh House and Shearwater. However, this did not lead to a significant increased demand for residential placements within the independent sector. Analysis of the data indicates that were we able to accommodate existing residents, that we will be able to accommodate existing residents within Shearwater and Harry Sotnick House by October 2020. In September 2018, Harry Sotnick House occupancy was currently at 42 beds, with giving us 50-bed capacity. We don't currently have an extra care dementia offer in the city, and when we undertook the dependency exercise to determine staffing requirements, assessments of a number of individuals showed that whilst they were unable to manage on their own at home, they did not need the full 24-hour residential care offer, but there are no local facilities to bridge this gap currently for people with dementia. Building an extra care facility for people with dementia will enable people to live in a supported environment with skilled and trained staff available on site to support them 24 hours a day, but afford them their own front door with the ability for regular support and on-call immediate response should this be needed. We are therefore seeking to repurpose the current Edinburgh House site and create a dementia extra care facility which will provide alternatives for people with dementia in the future, maintaining independence and dignity in their own homes. An option for people with dementia to access supported living would build on the supported living opportunities that are already available in Portsmouth for other client groups that have been developed over recent years. Initial indications are that the Edinburgh House site could offer the potential to accommodate 50 units for extra care for people with dementia, more than the facility currently offers in residential beds. A capital bid has been developed which seeks to secure the necessary funding from the Council's capital programme for this project, and we're also exploring other opportunities to secure funding from external sources such as Homes England. We're also exploring future options for Hillsey Lodge site that will ideally be repurposed to continue in the support of people with care and support needs in a modern, appropriate setting, and believe that this will be suitable for younger adults with physical disabilities to have for supported living. We considered 4 options in coming to our conclusion. The first option was to maintain the existing permanent staffing levels within the 3 Portsmouth City Council homes, Shearwater, Hillsey and Edinburgh House. This option would see the current permanent established staffing levels maintained across the 3 homes. Whilst this would be affordable, it wouldn't address the quality and environmental issues and would risk regulatory action from CQC, the Care Quality Commission. Option 2 was to maintain the existing permanent staffing levels within the 3 homes but reduce the number of registered beds in each home. This would have led to higher unit costs as there would be a reduction in income and the running costs of each home would remain broadly as now, but again would not address the quality and environmental issues, and this would also not be affordable or financially sustainable in the long term. Option 3 would be to implement the full cost of staffing review and continue funding the increased staffing levels in the long term. This would not be affordable or financially sustainable in the long term and again would not address the quality and environmental issues in the home. And option 4, which is our preferred option, was to implement the full cost of the staffing review in the short term and continue funding the increased staffing levels, reduce the number of beds PCC would require in the future based on the demand data analysis. This option would enable the rationalisation of the existing estate, ensure sufficient beds are available for the known demand, whilst ensuring appropriate staffing levels to deliver safe, quality care within the available financial envelope, whilst also presenting the opportunity to provide additional care options for people with dementia. Option 4 is the preferred option, as I've said, as it will deliver the necessary quality service within the available financial envelope. It also aims to mitigate against compulsory redundancies as we seek to redeploy existing permanent staff to other care homes, and will also give us an option to develop the gap that we have around extra care dementia within the city. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Angela. I'm going to open it up to whichever council wants to go first.
Okay, we've only got the one which is a question, which is something that Mrs. Frampton brought up that I must admit I've completely forgotten about, which is the boiler at Hillsey Lodge. Has that money been spent?
No, we're still currently temporarily renting a boiler at a cost of just approximately £40,000 per annum.
Thank you, Luke. George?
Yes, thank you. I've got a few questions I just wanted to raise, really. Obviously, we're presented that there is a perceived decrease in demand for places. However, the evidence that we're being presented with by the deputations show that people are being told when they're applying for it that there isn't the space available. So we need to establish where the truth lies, really. That's the difficult one to come across, that if Matthew's going to be making a decision today that's based on the perception as a decreased demand, then we need to establish fully that that is the case and that the remaining capacity within the homes is going to be satisfactory, so that we don't end up relying on external private providers in the future. That's one point that I'd like to address. I don't know if do you want to take these individually? Is that okay?
So in order to get our data for the report, what we have done is looked at the orders that we have on our client record system, which is the packages that we commission both in the private and independent sector and within our in-house homes. The orders are put on as packages are commissioned, and they are reviewed on a monthly basis. I have the data in front of me from November 17 to, I'll put the glasses on now, sorry, to October 18 for both our in-house provision and also for our non-in-house provision, so within the private sector. I think in the early parts of the financial year, the end of the 16-17 financial year, which would have been about March 17, the numbers were higher. Since then, we have seen a steady decline in the numbers. And as I said, in September of this year, we had 69 in our in-house and 109 in the private sector, out of our 125 beds within our in-house provision.
And that would be every single person who's applied, considered, we're talking about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we don't have the if we don't have the provision within our in-house for whatever reason, people will be offered a private placement. So where we've seen a reduction in the private numbers, which haven't come down massively, they've come down from about 114 to 109, 114 to 110 in March 18. But our in-house has gone from 98 to 69 in the same period of time. Part of that was due to the quality issues in the embargo, but what we didn't see during that time was an increase in the demand for the private sector.
Okay, thank you. The other point you've addressed in the report that you're trying to avoid any compulsory redundancies from the existing care homes. What sort of reassurances are we being given at this stage that that will be the case and those staff will be redeployed into the remaining stock?
So we're working closely with our HR colleagues to do an analysis of our required staffing based on the dependency tool that was completed earlier in the year, and the number of staff and hours of staff that we have at each of the posts and each of the grades within the current permanent establishment. Because we've been topping up with agency staff, when you then look at the gaps that we've got in permanent posts within Shearwater, the staff within Edinburgh House can easily be accommodated within that, and some of the staff with Hilsey. Obviously, we're looking at 18 months further down the line for Hilsey. With that, we've also done some attrition rates and some analysis of our turnover of staff, and therefore we're really confident that even if it's 1 or 2 over, we'd be able to absorb that, because the turnover would be such that within that first 6 months or so, they would all be fully employed within the permanent establishment.
Thank you very much. The final point that I wanted to talk about was the capital funding and the sources of funding. Firstly, I'd like an update as to how that's progressing, whether you've had any feedback as to the funding for the the special care facility to replace Edinburgh House. Also, I'd like to explore the option of whether there's option within the capital funding for that to be used to implement the required improvements to the existing houses rather than going for a full place replacement of those.
Can I ask my finance colleague to answer that? That's all right.
Yeah, by all
Richard?
means.
On the capital bit, and then I'll...
The capital funding process is still underway at the moment, and we do not yet have confirmation that the capital funding is available for the 1920 capital programme, but it's being developed through that process, and there'll be confirmation within the February report to Council.
And just on the whether the capital funding is available to do, if it was chosen to retain the existing stock, whether that can be used for that purpose.
As part of the capital programme process, that could be an option. However, as highlighted by Angela throughout the report, the current staffing levels required at those dependency staffing ratios wouldn't be affordable within the current revenue budget.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just sort of another question, actually. So when you're talking about dementia extra care, it's all written in terms of council provision. Equally, the other extra care that the council has is all provided through housing associations, through Housing and Care 21, which obviously we're in a somewhat different situation now with the abolition of the cap on housing borrowing, but I fully understand why the existing homes have been built in the way that they have. So what consideration has been made to using a a registered social landlord rather than the council to develop this stock, or is that it has a decision been made?
We've had an initial conversation with housing colleagues who specialise in the procurement and sourcing of funding for these sorts of developments. I think the view at the moment is that we would, because it's a specialist dementia facility, that we would want it to be a Portsmouth City Council built facility, and we would also at this stage probably be looking for us to run it as an in-house dementia specialist extra care facility. However, that final decision has not been taken.
Anything else, Luke or George? Okay, thank you, and thank you for your deputations to start with, and thank you, Angela, for the report and input from officers, and thank you to George and Luke for your questions. I just want to start off by saying that this strategy, 6 months ago when the Lib Dem administration came into the city, we were very keen to get an idea of what gaps in provision we had in care in the city, and this was something that has been worked on by officers for some time, because we were very conscious that we weren't able to fill all the gaps of the needs of our older people and anyone within adult social care within the city, and therefore this has come as off the back of that. So that has been a process it's been going through, and you heard Angela mention earlier about physical disability extra care as well, which is another area that we're haven't got the provision for in the city, and that's something that may go on the Hilsea Lodge site should I take the decision to go with option 4 today. But that is a process, and that doesn't finish here. We've also got looking at other possibilities for provision, including a possible dementia village, which is something that comes up. I'm just going to ask a few questions, if I may, Angela, just for some clarity, just to flesh out a bit more what's written here. So if we look at 3.3, we've got, and you did mention about the facility that what CQC said, and also what's there. Can you just explain what the difference between a physical layout of a building built 41 years ago is to what you would build today for a dementia facility?
A home that's built today would have corridors that would enable people to walk in more of a figure of 8 or a circle rather than straight up and down corridors, which we definitely have at Edinburgh House. It would also be wide enough to support people that have wheelchairs or walking frames. Particularly at Edinburgh House, the corridors are incredibly narrow, and if somebody's either trying to walk with a frame or be pushed in a wheelchair, there isn't space for 2 people to sort of cross. Lighting is really important for people with dementia, so that it's light and bright. Good best practice standards now would say that people do have access to personal ensuite facilities for them, and have space where they can wander safely, and an environment that is level and light, bright, colour coordinated, so that all of the sensory needs that people have are met as well. And what CQC was saying, and particularly within the feasibility study, what was also raised is that within Edinburgh House particularly, a lot of older people now require what's called a profiling bed, which in lay terms is a hospital bed, because of the support they need around care. We can't even get profiling beds into all the rooms at Edinburgh House because the doors aren't wide enough to get them in, and so it's those sorts of things as well. So if somebody has a bedroom in a purpose-built setting, that room would be big enough for any piece of equipment that they would need to meet their needs.
Thank you, Angela. The second question I have, I'm just going to move on to Sue Harvey's deputation. So if I could draw your attention to, so it's the top of our page 4, and it's just about, she did say about she was seeking confirmation of level of occupancy last few years for the homes. So just wondering if that might be able to be made available to Sue Harvey.
Sorry, that's no problem at all. If I speak to you afterwards and you give me your details, I can get you occupancy levels for our in-house back to 2014, 15. If you would like it back that far, that's no problem at all, and can give you the corresponding for private funded packages for older people with dementia too, if you would like that. That's not a problem.
Thank you, Angela. And then a couple of paragraphs after that, we've got about the issue that that was raised at the QA. Can you just explain about who the QA serves and where that discrepancy between what Marie Edwards said at the meeting compared to what was picked up at the hospital?
So QA Hospital obviously supports people from Portsmouth and South East Hampshire and a little bit beyond, but broadly speaking from Portsmouth and South East Hampshire. It is around a third of the people that use QA are Portsmouth residents and approximately 2/3 are not. I have double checked today, and as on Saturday there was one person from Portsmouth waiting for a dementia residential bed. Of those. Every week on a Friday there is something called a delayed transfer of care meeting where health and social care all get together and agree the bed blockers, if we want to call them that, and on Friday there were no delayed transfers of care attributable to adult social care for Portsmouth in QA. So there may well have been for Hampshire, and I'm guessing that the other 7 people were for Hampshire, but there was one person awaiting residential dementia bed for Portsmouth on Saturday.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that as well, so thank you for that, Angela. There's also discussion with Hampshire, because we do realise they have particular issues in delayed transfers of care from the hospital. That might be something that we as the city might be working with them on to see if we can help them with their issues. Because obviously, though we have one, so on Saturday we had one person who was delayed transfer of care from Portsmouth. We do realise that any delayed transfers from Hampshire can have an impact on Portsmouth residents, and that's something else that we do need. We know that the hospital serves that larger area, and we need to think outside our boundaries, because it's our hospital in our city, but it's also the hospital for our area. So those kind of things are continuing on. Please do, yeah.
Sorry, I just come back. I think the other bit that I was just saying that is that the staff within QA won't necessarily think postcode before they answer the questions, because actually, why should they? They're looking after people and doing a really good job at looking after people, so it might just be they're saying, yes, we've got these people. They won't necessarily have thought a proportion is Portsmouth and a proportion's not.
Thanks, Angela. Just on to Christine Frampton's deputation. Can I just, looking at point 2, it was just the state of the, it was just the comment about dementia as a progressive disease. Can you just explain the how the difference, what's the difference between, say, living at home with dementia, extra care with dementia, being in a care home with dementia, how that's different, and why having those different levels of care is important, or options of care?
Obviously, most people will start from the premise of living at home. As people develop dementia, there may be a number of different skills that they've had prior to the condition that they are no longer able to manage themselves. That might be about going out and about safely, it might be about managing their personal care, it might be remembering to eat or drink or have stranger awareness and all of those sorts of things. And so we absolutely recognise that although a lot of people with dementia are still able to live at home with care and support at home, and a lot of people still do that, there comes a time then for some people that is no longer an option. At the moment in the city, where people's safety can't be managed effectively for them at home, the only option available to us is residential or nursing care for dementia, and at the moment we're really talking in this case about residential care. What the extra care facility would do would be to enable people that don't need 24/7 hands-on care as such to be able to live within almost a bit of a halfway between living on their own and living in a larger care home setting. We would need, because it's extra dementia, it would need to be specialist staff. It wouldn't be about having the same sort of levels of staffing skills that we have within ordinary extra care, because they'll be need to understand the condition and how the condition progresses. And so really that's the three options that we're looking for, that people will be able to still live at home as long as they want to. If people aren't able to live at home, or if they've got a disease that is clearly progressing, somebody going into an extra care facility when they're still in the fairly early stages of the disease, from other schemes around the country, what that's evidence is people are able to remain in those schemes for longer because they get used to that when they're in a level where they're still able to manage some of the things for themselves. But obviously if people get to a point, and some people will, where they cannot manage to stay in extra care, as currently happens with our frail elderly extra care, then obviously residential or nursing care will still be available to them.
Thank you, Angela. Just on the... I think I've covered that one. So just come to Richard now, just about the funding. So we mentioned in there about Homes England, and that's something that we are looking at doing. Can you just explain how that process works and what fund that is that we're looking to access, or possibly looking to access for the for any repurposing work?
Okay, so the current capital bid is seeking funding from the corporate resources from the City Council as part of its capital programme process that it undertakes each year. The additional funding is something that our housing team are experts at applying for, and it would seek a contribution towards the scheme as long as we meet certain criteria. And as I say, our housing colleagues are the ones that are experts in claiming that, and they have been successful in bidding for that funding in the past. There are early stages with that process, but they do feel confident that it would be available should the programme be agreed.
Thank you. And am I right in saying that you can't actually put an actual bid in until you've made a decision on what you're going to do to that Homes England fund?
Yes, the housing colleagues have advised us that in order to be successful in completing the bid process with Homes England, they would need confirmation that the scheme is progressing.
Thank you. That was also referring as well to Christine's deputation, so I just wanted to make sure that was covered. Just the last thing, because this was brought up a few times within the deputations, the other written deputations as well. If I can go to item 7 in the reports, the equality impacts assessment, can it just be explained why the full assessment hasn't been done, and just about how this works, because there was some concern that this would perhaps breach the Equalities Act. So if we could just get that clarification about what's going on.
So the equality impact assessment has been started and has been produced to a level. Because the proposal is for closure and repurposing, when I spoke to our Access and Equality Advisor, What we were told is that this was engagement rather than consultation as such if the decision is agreed or the proposal is agreed, and therefore we can't finalise the EIA, the Equality Impact Assessment, until the engagement is completed. So we have done a significant amount of it, talking about what's within the JSN, the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, looking at what our strategy is, who is the policy, service, function, project of the strategy. That's all been done, what outcomes we want to achieve and who we need to consult with, which is a bit around engagement rather than consultation. We have looked at whether or not the protected groups and whether or not we believe that there is a breach under the Equalities Act for this, and what we feel is that at the moment people within the city who have dementia don't have as many options as people who don't have dementia, and therefore by agreeing to the proposal and developing the extra care option, it gives them access to the same range of options as other client groups.
Thank you for that, Angela. That concludes my question, so I'm just going to make a bit of a statement. As I say, I'd like to thank everyone's engagement in this. I absolutely understand that for people with families with people in these care homes, this is obviously an upheaval. This is something that is concerning for you, and I absolutely understand the points that are being made. I do hope that some of the replies have been given today, and what has been said today will help somewhat alleviate. But I am minded to follow the recommendation option 4. What I do want to absolutely make sure happens is that what goes on from now on with residents and families is that what happens in terms of the engagement with you is led by you and led by families and by the residents, in terms of moving on to what happens after the closure of both Edinburgh House and Hilsey Lodge. So I'm formally sorry.
George and I get the chance to comment before you make your decision.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, that's fine.
Sorry.
If
I'd just like to make a few words of comment, and I'm sure Councillor Fielding would appreciate the option if you choose to do so. So, one thing, I'm sorry for interrupting your flow. One thing I felt a little bit vindicated over is in the report where it talks about some of the numbers, and about £2.5 million and £2.2 million, and those numbers did come forward 3 years ago. When I was portfolio holder, I was more than a little sceptical of them at the time, and here we are 3 years later, and the buildings are still up in one piece. I mean, we didn't need to spend that much money on them, and we haven't. This, of course, is driven by something else, which is briefly mentioned in the report, which is Harry Sonic House. I'm not sure the deputations are aware, but that is a property which the council has effectively ended up retaking management control over, which wasn't expected or planned, but we were put in a situation where that was the only really feasible outcome, and that has changed the situation in terms of the beds available. I think one of the other things which relates to this actually is the council has published its schedule of savings for the next year, and part of that includes £500,000 saving on care home costs. Now, that's all of the care homes, and it's not completely clear in how it's written in the document about what that relates to, but I think some of that is going to relate to Edinburgh and Hilsey, and that is part of the reason for that, and we should acknowledge that. It's not to say just because money is a significant factor that invalidates a decision, but I think it does need to be acknowledged. Just in terms of the recommendations, just 2 points I'd like to make to you. So one is, I think the RSL option should still be considered. I think it's premature to say that, well, it should be a council-done scheme, just because the Housing 21 care homes, which are, extra care schemes that have already been done, have been done to a very high quality, and I think it would be a mistake not to fully explore the options there. The other thing is the recommendations make specific reference to using the Edinburgh House site as the place to put that facility. Now, that might be the right option, but I think it's coming from the point of view of, well, that's already adult social care land, whereas really we should be thinking about council land and about managing the whole portfolio. I mean, on the face of it, and I'm not saying this is the right answer, but it's, on the face of it, to me, the most plausible looking site is actually the in Alloway Avenue, where we've got some land back from King Richard's School as part of that development. I think that would be a good fit for it, and I would ask really that just the amendment, just the recommendation as it stands, names a particular location, and I would simply say that I think actually you need to look at the portfolio of land across the council first before deciding where the best spot might be.
Thank you, Luke, and apologies. I was sort of getting ahead of myself there. George?
Yes, I mean, I think I've made my points quite clear earlier in the questions that I was raising. My main concerns are always for the residents of these care homes and the families that it affects. I want to make sure that any decision's not taken lightly in terms of the upheaval that will have that in terms of changing location as people have to leave Edinburgh House in the first year and Hilsey Lodge in the second year. I'm also concerned that we will have the necessary capacity should an increased demand come. Dementia is something that is affecting more and more people in society, and we have to make sure that as a council we have the capacity to provide that care. So I find it difficult to square the concept that we are having less and less demand in that respect. But yes, as I say, overall, always will be taken with care consideration in terms of the families and also the staff that may be affected in this in the upheaval that's to come. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Just in reply to a couple of those things, there is a financial aspect to this. I think that's quite clear, Luke. But I do think, as I said at the beginning, the starting point for this is about what provision do we need in the city, and actually the happenstance of if you have the right kind of care for people, then it's going to cost you less, because that's just the way it is. Because if you have people who are thriving as well as they can in the right kind of care situation, then it is going to cost you less money, because they're going to have more stability in their care and their lives. So that's certainly the point of view. It's an offshoot of having the right care. So I do think that's key. In terms of Alloway Avenue, I don't agree. I do think Edinburgh House is the right site. However, thank you for the suggestion of that place in Alloway Avenue. I certainly think as we're moving forward in terms of what provision we need across the city, then I'm very happy for that suggestion and any other suggestions for any site for either extra care or any social care, whether it be adults, children, whether it be places for other kinds of housing for our residents, or any other kind of accommodation. I'd be really happy to take that on board. I think certainly with Hilsey Lodge, for example, that's certainly something that is we're not quite sure what's going to go on there. We would like it to be physical disability extra care, but that would be something too. But if there's other sites and other places that are more appropriate, then we're very happy with any suggestions. And I just think on the final point, thank you, George. I think the point that we have here is that we have some people who are in dementia residential care who, if there was the opportunity of having dementia extra care, they would be in there instead. So I mean, I think it's not quite saying that everyone who who's in our care homes, should there have been extra care available, would be in that care home. That would be so that and certainly I mentioned about the idea we've got going forwards. We're trying to look at a dementia village idea, which would give even more provision for dementia in there, and recognising even more the different needs of people with dementia, because we do know, and I think everyone here understands, that dementia is not just doesn't all look the same for the same people. It is a spectrum, and it's about having the right thing for people living in their own homes from the early stage right through to having that provision in the care homes at the end. So I'm happy with, as I say, going with option 4. I do think that provides the strategy we need in the city for people with dementia. As I was saying, I do want, and I will ensure that that officers work with families and the residents to the greatest degree, and that you lead on that in terms of what is right for your families and your family members who are in Hilsey Lodge and Edinburgh House, in terms of moving them to the appropriate place. And I really think that is important. We will make sure that engagement will be done in full, and also we will make sure that we are meeting up to our equality duty under the equality impact assessment. Could I just ask Angela, when would that be completed?
I think obviously we were waiting for the decision today. We will now work on when we start engagement, whether that's this side of Christmas or whether we'd start that the other side of Christmas, and we will be asking relatives when for them that is a better time to do that. I would anticipate that the engagement to then enable us to finish fully doing the EIA will take about 3 months.
Thank you. So I'd like to formally go with the recommendation of which is recommends that the Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care 1 approves the preferred option 4 in relation to the rationalisation of the in-house residential estates. 2 agrees that officers commence immediate engagement with residents, family, staff and wider stakeholders, e.g. primary care, on the closure of Edinburgh House in 2019 and Hilsey Lodge in 2020. 3 agrees that work continues on the repurposing the existing Edinburgh House site for the development of a specific dementia extra care facility, acknowledging that any development will be subject to securing sufficient capital funding. Thank you very much, everyone.